All right, everyone, welcome, welcome. This is Melissa Cavallo, Assistant Director of Career Counseling and Employer Relations at Rhode Island College, here to talk to you today about interviewing tips for career changers. All right, so in the first video, we talked about kind of doing your research and finding out what type of job you wanted to get into. In the second video, we talked about job searching. And in this third video, this is a final piece to the puzzle. This is interviewing, and we're also going to get just a tad bit into possibly salary negotiation as well. Okay, so you did your job search, you've got an interview. Okay, very great. Congratulations. So a couple of things you want to keep in mind are these days, it's not uncommon for your interview to maybe even be virtual. So a couple of things to keep in mind is really know the video platform ahead of time. See if you can find out what the video platform is, get a little bit familiar with it. Okay, make sure you set up your camera appropriately so you don't see anything that you don't want them to see in the background if you are at home. And just make sure that you're looking directly into the camera, which I know can feel a little bit awkward, right? Because you might be looking up at the dot above the screen, but once in a while, make sure you're glancing up there so it looks like you're looking right at them. But of course, you might want to be looking at your interviewers for cues like, are they interested in what I'm saying? That kind of thing. Okay. Also, make sure you minimize distractions around you. Make sure it's a nice quiet space when you're at home. And another thing, I can't stress this enough, is make sure that you dress completely. I know sometimes we can get a little comfortable if we're at home. You might be in comfy pants, your slippers, things like that. Make sure when you're interviewing, you are dressing the part from head to toe, because it is important. You're going to feel better if you are dressed, confidently and completely. And then also don't be afraid to ask how the company is handling, what might be going on with COVID, how they are responding to that, how that's affecting the company. So another thing to keep in mind is dress. So basically what you want to figure out is maybe you can do a little bit of research, right, on the dress code for that company. And you can find that out through sometimes looking online, through networking a little bit. What can you find out about the company culture? But basically your attire should be clean, crisp, and professional. And when in doubt, you can't go wrong with a blazer, right? Or maybe even a suit, but do your research, because if you are going to be working for like a startup company where everyone works in jeans every day, they might kind of look at you a little differently if, you're dressed to the T when it's a very casual company. So doing that research can really help. And just err on the side of caution, like more moderate in taste whenever possible. Basically, you should not be drawing attention away, to you and away from the value that you're bringing. So, you don't want to have any super distracting jewelry or purple hair if you can avoid it. Okay, anything like that. So keep in mind, you can be getting that call for an interview at any time, right? So make sure you have a professional voicemail, right? Just check it. Maybe you haven't listened to it in a while. Make sure it's a nice professional voicemail. And good phone etiquette, okay? Only pick up that phone when you're in a place where you can appropriately take it without any distractions. And another thing too is a lot of times employers do Google you. It really happens. So I definitely suggest Googling yourself ahead of time to see what you have out there and making sure that whatever you're portraying on social media is the you that they want you to see. You might be surprised at what might be hanging out there from 10 years ago. So another thing is, I've mentioned this before, research yourself. And what I mean by that is maybe you take a few personality assessments, you get the language you need to describe who you are. Who are you as a person, right? Also, you want to make sure that you research the field that you're getting into, whether it's a new field or a field you've been in for a while. What are some challenges or things going on right now in the field? And then also researching the organization. So important to really know that. And your phone might ring after you send in a resume with that employer doing a pre-screening interview. And you've got to be ready. They might say, what do you know about this company? And, so make sure you take notes. And I know this sounds kind of silly, but whenever you apply to a job, maybe you can keep a notebook. What job did I apply to? What is the job, right? Just so that way you have that on hand, because it is very important that you can speak to the company. So 47% of employers have rejected a job seeking candidate because they didn't have any information about the company they applied to. So make sure that you have that knowledge. You know about the company, and then you know about the position. And also, when you do get an interview, find out who you're meeting with, if you can, if the person's name, maybe if they have, what their position is there, because you can do a little bit of research on them too, right? You can look on LinkedIn, you can do some Google searches. Maybe it will make you feel more comfortable if you know who you are meeting with. And you can totally walk into an interview prepared with notes, right? With a notebook, with questions, with things you want to mention about yourself. So know that you're totally welcome to do that. A lot of people ask me, what's the average length of an interview? It's 40 minutes. Okay, so it totally can vary from company to company, but like on average, it might be somewhere around 40 minutes. All right, so I know this is kind of an important part a lot of people want to hear about is what kinds of questions are they going to ask me? You never know exactly what questions they're going to ask you, but there's probably about 10 popular questions that you're going to hear, pretty frequently. The big one is, first of all, I'll just kind of go through some of the main ones and then I'll break down how to answer them. But the big one is, tell me about yourself. And that's a really important one because oftentimes the interview will start off with that. And it's your opportunity to just kind of set the stage, right? And usually they're looking for you to speak for about 30 seconds. So tell me about yourself. What are any weaknesses or things you want to improve on? That's another question. Oftentimes they'll ask about your strengths. What strengths do you bring to the table? Sometimes they'll ask you about behavioral interview questions. Tell me about a time you made a mistake. Tell me about a time you had a difficult customer. All right. So kind of having those stories prepared in your mind of stories you can tell is really helpful. They might ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Okay. They're kind of looking to see the trajectory of where you see your career going. So maybe be thoughtful about that as well. And why do you want to work at our company? What makes you stand out? So think about other people who might be applying for this role. And again, what makes you stand out? So there's a really great resource I want to recommend. It's called The Big Interview. You can just go to biginterview.com and you click on practice, the word practice, and then you can click on the question library. And in that question library, they'll give you all different types of questions that they might ask you on an interview. And there's general questions, or you can break it down by industry. But one thing that you might find helpful is there's a section that says top 10 questions asked by employers. Get really familiar with those and then maybe poke around, maybe the industry that you're interviewing for as well, see what suggestions they have there. All right, so let's talk about tell me about yourself for a moment. So a couple of things you want to talk about is who you are, right? So you want to start off strong, grab their attention with kind of a big picture statement, right? Of who you are, your accomplishments, what sets you apart. And then also why you're qualified. So maybe think about any additional highlights that you have, maybe a few bullet points that emphasize your accomplishments and your selling points. If there's anything else you want to mention, like any gaps in your employment or transitions, and it's okay to add some personal details. And it's also important to say why you're here, right? So show that you have enthusiasm, show that you've done some research on the company. So here's just like an example answer. I've been working in marketing for the last couple of years since graduating from Cornell, and I love it. I'm currently working as a marketing coordinator at a startup. I'm responsible for social media marketing presence and also work closely with our marketing manager. I'm running our events, which is a lot of fun. And before that, I spent a year as an assistant in the global marketing team at American Express. That was a great experience. I supported 2 VPs in the group, managed the calendars, handled expense reports, and made sure everything ran smoothly. And I loved how every day was a little bit different. I got to work with great people who had a lot to teach me about marketing. And I also volunteered to work on some creative projects outside of my role because I really wanted to explore my creative side there. But unfortunately, due to a reorg in the team, my position was eliminated. And although I like my job at this stage of the career, I just realized I needed to find a company where I can see long-term growth. I think this position would be a great fit. So that is just an example, right, of a tell me about yourself example. Really put a lot of time into crafting yours, right, and thinking about what you have to offer them there. So another question they might ask is, tell me about your strengths. So this question is really an opportunity to talk about your best qualities, what sets you apart. And sometimes in our culture, we're told not to brag, right? Not to brag. Well, it's okay to be, you can still be modest, but don't be afraid to share your accomplishments. right? Because they don't know what they are unless you tell them. So do not be afraid to share your strengths. What did you, when every place you left, you probably made it a little bit better somehow. How did you make it better? Don't be afraid to say that, right? So write down a list of your top strengths and decide maybe what 3 are the most relevant for the position you're applying for. And try not to use the generic strength that anyone can claim, right? Like sometimes I hear people say, I'm a hard worker or I'm a people person, right? That doesn't really tell them a lot. It's not a super impressive answer. So maybe instead of, here's an example, instead of saying that you're a hard worker, say, one of my strengths is my strong work ethic, right? When I commit to a deadline, I do whatever it takes to deliver. Last week, I had a report due and got some numbers back late from our team. And I just finished that spreadsheet. I stayed up as long as I could because I knew that client needed to receive that. Okay. So anything you can do to kind of stand out from the traditional, I'm a hard worker, I'm a people person, will tell them a story to explain how. Okay. It's all in the stories. Okay. They might ask you, tell me about a weakness. And this is always the tricky one. Sometimes people will tell you, don't try to play a strength off as a weakness. So you don't want to say like, oh, I care too much or I work too hard. That just sounds kind of like, well, are you really saying the truth or not? All right. You don't want to choose a weakness that could limit your ability to do the job. So if the job calls for someone to be detail oriented, you might not want to share that your weakness is being disorganized. Okay. If it's a management position, you don't want to tell the interviewer that you can't delegate. You want to pick a weakness that's real. And don't be defensive or dwell on the negative, right? This isn't like a therapy session here. You just want to name your weakness, right? Provide a little bit of detail and then move on to how you're addressing it, right? Maybe how you're improving it. So here is kind of like an example answer. Sometimes I can be a bit too honest when I provide feedback to coworkers. My personality is naturally pretty straightforward and to the point, and most of my colleagues value that. But I've learned that there are times in the job when more diplomacy is required. So I actually took a training class on conflict management. It really opened up my eyes to the need to communicate differently with people. So now I'm better at providing that constructive feedback, even if it doesn't come naturally, right? This is something that I'm working on. So that's an example of how you can address a weakness. And don't use this exact answer necessarily. These are just examples. Really think about what yours are. So at the end of the interview, the employer will give you an opportunity usually to ask them questions. So you want to make sure you have some thoughtful questions you can ask them instead of the obvious stuff like, when do I start, and that kind of thing. So some questions that you might want to think about asking them, maybe ask them, hey, can you describe an average day for me? Or what do you enjoy the most about working here? What qualities are you looking for in new hires? What's the most challenging aspect of this job? How is an employee evaluated here and by whom? Okay, those are just some examples of thoughtful questions you can ask. And I can't stress how important confidence is. So in the interview, so 38% of employers rejected a candidate because of the voice quality and overall confidence level or lack of a smile. All right, so good body language is also very important. Confidence is so important. So even though it might be difficult for you looking for a job right now, dig deep, okay? Because nobody wants to hire someone that looks sad, to be honest, right? They want to hire someone that makes them feel good. So dig deep, put your best foot forward and have that confidence, okay? Everyone has strengths, so think about what those strengths are and how you can present them. Another thing I thought it would be good to share is there has been research done that asked employers what career competencies are they looking for in employees. And I just wanted to share the top 7 that came out. These are things that you want to show you have. These are skills you want to show you have that employers are looking for. Some of them are kind of basic, but it's important. So critical thinking, all right? You can think critically. Communication, right? You can communicate. Teamwork. Information technology, right? You're not afraid to learn new technology skills. Leadership, right? Who doesn't want to hire a good leader? Work ethic, okay? And then finally, career management. How are you continuing to evolve as a person? Are you continuing to learn and get that professional development? So finally, just want to talk a little bit about salary information. You don't want to, when possible, you want to try not to bring up salary when possible. But if you're in a position where, hey, you've got 2 job offers right there, you might need to kind of bring it up. So keep that in mind. It's important to do your research when it comes to salary, right? So look at Glassdoor, right? Or LinkedIn. There's different places where you can look and see what the market is. And then make sure you're getting what you're worth, what the market is, how many years experience you have. And then when you're if I always recommend, when possible, why not try to negotiate salary, right? Why not try, especially if it comes in lower than you'd like. So research that market value so you can clearly say, well, I see someone with my experience makes $65,000. I've been doing research here and here. Can we try to get a little bit closer to that number? Okay, for example, see where you're at. Remind them of your value. Okay, so if you're a career changer, you come with experience. I've worked in this industry. I've worked in this industry. I have this many years experience. I do have a lot of value I bring. I'm willing to mentor others. I bring that value. And then also just realize there's other things you can negotiate besides salary. A lot of people don't realize that. You can negotiate work flexibility. Hey, maybe you want a flexible work schedule, or maybe you want more vacation time. You could maybe even negotiate your first review instead of waiting a year. Hey, can you evaluate me after 6 months? And then maybe you can see if there's a little pay increase that can come along with that, right? You can negotiate the amount of hours you work a week or when you work those hours. So these are just some different things to kind of keep in mind there. So that is, in a nutshell, things you need to know about interviewing. I'm happy to be here as a resource for you. I can, if you want to send me an email, I can let you know any resources that I have referred to in these videos. And I hope you learned something, and I wish you all the best. Again, this is Melissa Carvalho, and you can email me at mcarvalho, M-C-A-R, B as in Victor, A-L-H-O @ric.edu. And I wish you all of the best. Take care.